Hello, my name is Toni Whalen, and I teach English at the Tarrant County College Northeast Campus and at some of our dual credit partner high schools. Today, I will be discussing with you one of my own personal fail forwards, specifically dealing with overcomplicating an activity. Oftentimes, when I try out a new engaged learning activity in my class, I get really excited about how all the possibilities can be used for this activity and how I can use this in different ways to engage my students further with the material. While that can be a great thing and create a lot of different ideas for future lessons, it can often backfire. For example, as an English instructor, the worst day of class is always when my composition classes go over MLA-style documentation. It's a long, boring process with a lot of fiddly details, and since citation generators exist, students often don't really see the point in learning how to do citations themselves. So, in fall 2019, I came up with what I thought was a brilliant way to turn teaching MLA-style documentation into an engaging, collaborative learning activity. I planned to split my classes into their base teams, then each base team would receive a sheet with several different texts that described all the different parts of the texts that would go into an MLA-style citation. So, for example, one would say, this is a book, its author is so-and-so, the title is thus and such, it came out in 2009, it was published by X company. The students would then have to take that description and turn those descriptions into proper MLA-style citations, with each member of the group contributing at least one citation. The group was then supposed to compile all of their citations together into a brief works cited, and the group then as a whole would need to format the whole works cited properly in order to complete the assignment. So how did this stroke of genius possibly go wrong? All of this was supposed to be done through Google Docs. I didn't have any paper backups because I was providing computers for my students. What I didn't count on, though, was that these were school computers and my students didn't necessarily know how to log into them or necessarily know their login information at all. And so when they didn't know that, they couldn't access the document with all of the descriptions, so they couldn't even get started until they'd logged in. So each team ended up with a number of different staggered start times, and this created a lot of confusion over who would do which citation in each team. And while I had planned for the formatting to end up being a team effort, when some of the team members finished earlier than others, because of that staggered start time, the formatting wasn't necessarily updated after the fact. So the collaborative element of this activity fell apart almost entirely because of this initial technical issue. Now, I've since used this activity very successfully in other courses. It's great because it makes them individually accountable for learning how to do their own citation, while also giving them a bit of a support structure for creating their citations, and finally, it's collaborative in bringing the whole document together and having them format the document together. However, this clearly ended up being a bit of a failure. And the failure here was clearly with, on the one hand, overcomplicating the activity, especially in my first time using it, and also relying too much on the technology. So what did I learn about overcomplicating activities, and how can we all fail forward from this learning opportunity? The biggest thing to remember in avoiding complication in your lessons is to simplify your design. Most of us are probably aware of the acronym KISS. Keep it simple, sweetie, or whatever you prefer for the second S. There are a few ways to keep this in mind as you're designing a simplified lesson or activity. First, no matter what form your instructions will take in the lesson, whether written or spoken, make sure that you have them written out ahead of time. Once they are written out, take the time to make sure they are all listed in the correct order, that every step is listed, and that you don't have any extraneous information in there. That can trip your students up just as much as missing information. In my case, I hadn't considered giving a step where the teams divvied out their citations, so some teams didn't communicate on that until it was too late. Next, try to consider where your students might get lost. For the activity I did, I knew students would need computers, but it didn't occur to me that they wouldn't know how to sign in on the school computers. Those points of confusion can be difficult to anticipate, but if you can catch it ahead of time, you'll be glad for it. Try not to rely more on technology than necessary. If I had set the assignment up so that each group only needed one computer to complete the assignment, or if I had created a paper backup, I could have fixed the initial problem. Finally, focus on your main point. What content are you trying to get students to master with this activity? Is your message still clear, or have you added unnecessary layers that are covering that up? With my MLA style lesson, technology issues got in the way of students learning the material. Of course, it's all well and good to suggest how to simplify designs for lessons and activities, but we also need to be able to recognize when we've strayed away from that simplification into overcomplication. Looking at your plans, you may realize you have too many steps for the time given. The harder your time constraints are, the less room you have for error, so make sure you are budgeting enough time, including time to troubleshoot. Sometimes you might also realize you are pulling your students' attention in too many directions, with one activity to do over here and another step over there. When that happens, you might lose sight of your main focus, the content that you're trying to teach. And when that happens, you can be sure your students are too busy figuring out the process to learn the lesson. When you recognize these signs of overcomplication, take a step back and refocus on how to communicate that main idea. The most important thing to realize when planning out an activity like this is that some things will fail, no matter what we do, and we just need to accept that and do better. As instructors, we're often very generous in showing patience and giving second chances to our students, but not necessarily to ourselves. First attempts at a new lesson or a new activity will often fall flat or even fail. As long as we can identify some way of making it better next time, by improving our instructions or avoiding layers of complication, we're failing forward, and the next time we cover the same lesson or activity, it will be better. Even if it's an activity that we've done 100 times in dozens of classes, eventually something will fail, and we simply need to roll with it. Just as we are teaching our students to persist in their learning and continue to improve, we need to acknowledge the process of learning we're all going through in our careers as instructors.